And without further ado, I'm going to let Marta get started. And I'm just going to introduce myself. So I'm Marissa Elliott, and I'm the talent engagement manager at Next Group. So I am the one that you will see on most of these workshops. I'm also one of the first people that you would interact with if you join our network. And we're so happy to have Marta here tonight. It's going to be a really fun session. And if you wouldn't mind just saving any questions or anything, you could put them in the chat, but we probably won't address them until the end. So we'll have breaks to sort of answer questions at different points. So go ahead, Marta.
Sure. So we obviously we have a very small group, so we can be, a little loosey-goosey with this. And if there's something that we want to spend more time on or less time on, we can totally do that. I think so. Marissa, the second slide just had instructions for the chat, which I think people um, already saw.
Mhm.
Katie, I see your comment about being your profile pic until you need to be live. That's totally fine. I would say everybody should do what is comfortable to them. In general, I'd ask you to think about with other kinds of meetings. It's very hard for presenters if they're just facing like a sea of blankness. I do an exercise when we do this live where people can see the difference it makes between having people paying attention and not. And then when you think about that in terms of like, Zoom meetings and not seeing anybody's face, it's really startling. But obviously, people are eating dinner, it's evening, you've been on Zoom calls all day. Everybody should do whatever is comfortable for them. Um, so if you feel like being on, that's great. And I'll just make uncomfortable eye contact with you the entire time. Um, Let me tell you a little bit about myself. Obviously, one of the first things you're going to notice is that I have zero graphic design skills. That is okay. I have other skills. But when I was a little girl, if you asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I said I wanted to be a gas station attendant. And my thinking was, nobody would get mad at me for having dirty clothes because of the coveralls. I could get as dirty as I wanted. And I would just talk to strangers all day, which sounded like a great idea to me. There were some issues with this plan. First of all, I don't know anything about cars and I don't want to learn anything about cars. Second of all, they don't really make those kinds of coveralls for people that are only 5 feet tall. And also, I have never lived in New Jersey, which is the only place where they still have gas station attendants. Are you from New Jersey, Katie? Nope.
No, but I have a friend who literally didn't want to leave New Jersey because of the gas station situation.
She didn't want to pump her own gas. My kids like still don't believe me that this is a thing. So instead of being a gas station attendant, I got a bachelor's degree in philosophy. And then I got a master's degree in English, which only sounds practical if you have a bachelor's degree in philosophy. And I did a lot of things over the years. I taught, I was a comedy writer, I was an editor, and about 10 years ago, I moved into marketing and communications. And that's really where I live now, primarily internal comms, but also marketing comms and things like that. Um, about a year and a half, maybe we're at 2 years now, a comedy club opened where I live in Oak Park, and I was about to be an empty nester. And I thought, I should try this. I've always wanted to try stand up. And so I started taking classes and I started performing, and it went really well. And so now I perform once or twice a month. And I realize sometimes more, sometimes less. I realized that all this time that I've been thinking, I have no idea what I want to do. I'm just flying from, job to job. That wasn't true. That everything I wanted to do, from being a gas station attendant to being a communications consultant, had a through line, and that through line was communication. And that what I really want to do is help people communicate better. And that in some ways, that's what I've always tried to do. So what I've been working on for about half a year now is workshops like this, putting together communications and comedy and showing people how it all fits together. So let's see, let's go to the next slide. How is comedy relevant to business? Let me ask you a question. If you can either use your actual hand or the little hand emoji from Zoom, how many of you have been to a comedy show before? I don't know about Melissa. Yep. All right. So it seems like everybody. One of the things you'll notice at a comedy show is that the comedian, if they have a question for you, they will almost always tell you how to respond. They won't just say, is anybody on the dating apps? They'll say, raise your hand if you're on a dating app. They won't say, who here has kids? They'll say, make some noise if you have little kids. So make some noise, round of applause, show of hands, and shout out your answer. The reason they do that is because they are telling you how they want you to give them feedback. And this is one of the first things I noticed was really relevant between comedy and communications. If you are like me, you may have found yourself in a situation where you have given a coworker or your boss or your mother something and said, what do you think? And they say, your logic doesn't make any sense here, or I don't really like this idea at all, or you are a complete disgrace to the entire family. And really all you were asking was, are there any typos? But if you don't tell people how to give you feedback, you're going to get all sorts of unhelpful feedback. And if you don't practice getting and giving feedback, then you don't know how to ask for the feedback you need. So comedy relates to business communications in a lot of different ways: audience awareness, self-awareness, flexibility, timing, both in terms of, how long a joke takes, and also, is this the appropriate time for a joke? Empathy, and flexibility, and resilience and feedback. And that's really what I want to focus on today, is resilience and feedback. I have kids. I like to describe, Marissa and I were just talking about our daughters. I like to describe my kids as adult adjacent. They are old enough to make their own decisions and young enough that I'm still expected to pay for everything. And at this age, I've noticed they are really not comfortable having difficult conversations. They really try to avoid them. And I don't think it's just this age, this generation. I think that's kind of what's behind a lot of the ghosting phenomena that people talk about with employers or dates or all sorts of things. And I really believe that a lot of that is because people are not used to having those what is my dog doing? Oh, for Pete's sake. They're not used to having those difficult conversations. We're going to have a difficult conversation when this is over, miss. They're not used to having those difficult conversations, and they're scared of them. So I would like us to do a little exercise. Marissa, if you can do the poll, we will start with that. All right, so these are questions for something I like to call food fight. If you can answer what you think about each one. Let's see, do we have answers, Marissa?
Yes, we do.
All right,
Unfortunately, I can't answer them. I don't know why. I'm going to share the results though.
Okay. All right. Is cereal a soup? Majority of people say no. Is hamburger a sandwich? Everybody says yes. And which pizza is better? Looks like majority must say thin crust. I can't see thin crust, but let's go to the next slide.
Okay.
So I like to call this game food fight or strong opinions on weak topics, because food is a really interesting thing that people have very strong opinions on, but they are actually willing to have argumentative conversations about and even change their mind. So would anybody like to make an argument for why cereal is a soup? I will tell you my argument.
Oh, I was,
Oh, go ahead, Melissa.
okay. I, well, I don't believe this, but I'm going to attempt this argument. If you put enough milk into the cereal bowl and only a smattering of, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, then you could say that there is more liquid to accoutrement in your bowl, and that is very much akin to soup, which is primarily liquid, I guess, as long as it's not like a chowder. So I think that that could be why some people could construe cereal as a soup.
Sure. Anybody else? Anybody have a counter argument or another argument for that?
I will argue against cereal as soup. I'll even come on video if that works. I would say cereal, the liquid does not have a base that is like a broth coming from a protein or a vegetable or fruit. I feel like that is a weak argument, but I'm gonna make it.
No, that's fine. It's interesting. I don't know if you've noticed, but both Melissa and is it Andrea or Andrea?
Andrea.
Andrea. Both of your arguments, you're starting with an assumption of what soup is and assuming that we all have the same assumption of what soup is. So my argument for why cereal is a soup is why wouldn't it be? Like there are plenty of cold milk-based soups like vichyssoise or cold leek soup or cold cucumber soup. So what's the difference if it's cereal, right? But that's going from a totally different definition of soup than either of you. I think we all agreed on hamburger being a sandwich, right? So that's no fun. What about pizza and deep dish or thin crust pizza?
I will go with thin crust. I think deep dish pizza sits like a rock in the bottom of your stomach. It takes a really long time to bake, and it's for tourists. So that's
nice.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else have a pizza opinion?
I have to have an opposite because I'm not a tourist. I've lived in Chicago my entire life, grew up in the city, and I prefer deep dish because now wood-fired pizza like from Italy, that's a totally different thing to me. But thin crust is like it's like cardboard. It's like a cracker. It's like why not just put something on like Ritz crackers? So that's my argument. I think deep dish is much better. So
I answered deep dish, but actually for me, it totally depends on the situation. Like I think deep dish is a meal and I think thin crust is a snack usually. Like and thin crust is a sharing thing. So let's go to the next slide. So let me ask, did anybody change their mind about any of these important issues of the day? I was really very intrigued by Melissa and Andrea by your definitions of soup, and I had not thought about that. Is there an actual definition of soup? So mine was changed a little bit. Melissa, you came off mute. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I don't think that my mindset shifted that much, but that's primarily because it was low stakes. Like you said, these are, things that I would like, I could imagine playing like a drinking game, right? And it's like super fun and you just can go around and around in circles and there's no sort of like, there's no downside to either thing. It's just like a fun, like thought experiment.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, Katie?
I was just going to say, I was on the fence about milk and soup. And when you said you were a philosophy major, I just told my son how I took intro to philosophy back at college. I think we spent the first 3 classes trying to say what chairness was and what's a chair. So I was thinking in terms of like, yeah, how do we define these things? So I'm willing to change it. I'm willing to say it's a soup.
There you go. Yeah. Do you think if we'd had more time to sit and prepare arguments, would there have been different arguments? Maybe we would have looked up the definition of soup. Maybe we would have looked up the history of, tavern cut, thin crust versus thick crust. I would be fascinated to know if our unanimous opinion that hamburgers are sandwiches, if that's geographic or if that's like generational or what. I'm really curious because usually that gets a little more debate. How do you think this would have gone if instead of which do you like better, thick crust or thin crust, we had said which is better, Chicago or New York? Would there have been a difference? You're right. Katie's got her fists up. Like now it's a fight because now it's not just about your opinion and what you do and don't like, it's about your identity, right? And so that's usually what gets us in trouble when we have these difficult conversations. It's not about that we have different opinions, it's when an opinion starts to interfere with your identity. So if you are in art class, for example, and you get feedback that your painting is horrible, that's really going to hurt because your identity is, I'm an artist, I'm in art class. But if you're in art class and you get feedback that if you use this brush technique, it might be better, not only is that more useful, but it's also not attacking your identity. So when you find yourself in conversations that are going nowhere and you can't figure out why you can't get your point across and why this person, whether it's your child or your coworker or your employee, why they feel so dug in, you could take a step back and think, wait a minute, what is the argument we're having? How important is it? Is this just soup or cereal? If so, okay, let them have their opinion. Is this something, are they digging in because this is their identity? Am I digging in because it's my identity? And how can we get this back to a place where we can actually have a conversation about it? So you can do this with, I have yet to come up with another topic that is as effective as food because I don't know what it is about us and food that everybody's willing to have an opinion and still talk about it. So let's talk a little bit more about feedback. If we go to the next slide. So, like I said, there are useful and less useful ways to give feedback. She found a squeaky ball in my study. I don't know why. So one way that people often give feedback is called a feedback sandwich. And you have probably seen this. You have a criticism sandwiched in between two compliments. So this would be an example. Thank you for baking me a cake. I generally think cake should be sweet, not salty. That icing was really pretty. So what are some pros and cons of this kind of method of feedback that people might see? Or some situations where it is and isn't useful? Yeah, Katie.
I have found if it's someone that I'm in a relationship with, whether it's at work or home, who uses this all the time, it starts to feel manipulative. And then you
Yeah.
hear the first thing and you're just waiting for the sandwich. Now, if I don't know them or it's just it's a once in a while interaction, I think it can maybe be better because I don't feel a little triggered. But anyway, I've come
No,
to
that
personally dislike the feedback sandwich.
that makes sense. A lot of people find this feels sort of inauthentic, right? It's also really not a great method if you really need the person to take the criticism to heart. Like if you're giving a performance review and you need them to understand that their job is in jeopardy, like sandwiching that between two compliments, you would not believe the number of people that leave meetings like that. They're like, oh, I'm doing a great job. They said so. And you're like, wait, how did you not hear that you're on a performance plan? Like, so you have to be really careful with it to make sure that that message is getting through. Are there any situations where it does feel like it would be really great?
I was just going to say, Marta, really quickly,
Yeah.
it's also just confusing when the sandwich method, right? Because if you look at it from a sort of numbers perspective, you've got 2/3 positive and 1/3 negative. That's why people are so confused by this model, I think, in general terms.
Yeah, I think so too. I think sometimes if really you are 2/3 positive and 1/3 negative, it could be okay. I think sometimes if you as the feedback giver are very insecure about giving feedback, it can be sort of a good gateway to giving feedback. Let's look at the next one. So SBI, situation, behavior, impact. You made a salty cake and that made me a little sick. So here's what happened and here was the impact of it. What are some pluses and minuses, good and bad places to use this? I personally think while I generally like this, I think also it can feel a little judgy. Like you are directly saying that the impact that you feel sick is because I put too much salt in the cake. And how do I know you weren't just sick to begin with? Right? I think it can be really effective for work situations where, there's more than one good way to do something, but you need somebody to understand why this is or isn't the good way to do it. What are some other ideas about that, how that might or might not work? Anybody? All right, let's look at the last one. So strength-based feed forward, because everything has to have a cute name, right? So this would be when you are giving a strength and then a future suggestion. So it's great that you're experimenting with new recipes, but in the future, you might want to read the recipe more carefully, right? So there's no criticism at all really here. It's just a suggestion for the future so it's kind of a more sophisticated version of the sandwich, right? Are there ideas people can think of that where this would and wouldn't be a great idea?
I feel like this could again be like maybe not direct enough. People might not glean from what you're saying exactly what like they wouldn't know that it was that they put too much salt. They just would think, oh, maybe I did something else wrong. Or
Right. Yeah, there's not a lot of detail here. It is good though if you don't want to discourage, if it's not that important and you want that person to keep trying to bake cakes. They're bored and this will keep them busy. So unfortunately, when we have feedback, we can't control how the other person gives us feedback. All we can do is control how we receive it. So let's look at the next slide. And this is about how you can respond to feedback. The first thing is if something is affecting you, take a breath. There is no rule on God's green earth that says you have to open your mouth right away, right? If somebody's saying something to you that's bothering you, take a breath. You can even say, I am hearing that you're saying that. I can't really talk about that right now. Can we make an appointment for tomorrow? Right? Or can we talk about that after dinner? Can we talk about that after I've had something to eat or a vodka? Whatever it is you need to be able to hear that feedback. But a good way to receive feedback, however you feel about it, is to thank the person, to ask any clarifying questions, and to express how you'll move forward. And the two examples that I've given here, one of them, the person is like, yep, you were right about that. I'm glad you recognize that I tried. Let me just be clear. You think the cake should have been sweeter. Okay, next time I'll use a recipe. The second way is very subtly, they're not listening to that, or they're listening to that feedback, but they're not admitting it, right? Thanks for noticing the icing. Clarifying question, did you not like the cake? I guess using sugar instead of salt is something I'll have to think about for next time. They are not agreeing to change that recipe at all. And that's okay. Just because somebody says something to you doesn't mean you have to take it in, right? You have to take it in terms of listening to it and making sure they feel heard, but you don't have to change your behavior. You want that salty cake, you make that salty cake, right? So what I'd like us to do, I'm going to put a link in the chat. Let's see what the best way for me to copy this link is. All right, so this link is everything. It's a Google Doc, and it's everything I just said, the 3 methods of feedback and how to respond to feedback. Marissa, let's go to the next slide. So what I'd like you to do is Marissa's going to break you into groups of, well, there are only
I
3
was
of
gonna
you and
say, do
3 of us.
yeah, I was gonna say, do we want to just do groups?
Why don't we
of-
just stay in one big group? Let's
Okay.
just stay in a group.
Perfect.
All right. What I'd like is for somebody to, I've got some scenarios on the next slide. So I need 2 volunteers, somebody to be the person receiving feedback and somebody giving the feedback. So let's go to the next slide. So here are some potential scenarios, sort of work related, kind of silly, but maybe you have something else that you personally are trying to give somebody feedback on that you want to say instead. So do we have a brave soul who is willing to say, thought I was on mute during a Zoom call, but I wasn't? Who can give me feedback on that? Or whatever you like.
I'll volunteer.
All right. And do we have a brave person to give the feedback using one of the methods we discussed? All right, Katie. All right, so Andrea, what scenario do you want Katie to give you feedback on?
I'll do, I guess, the icebreaker one, the second to last.
Okay, so Andrea created an icebreaker for a meeting and it took over the entire meeting.
Okay.
Katie, what feedback would you like to give her?
Andrea, you're so talented with the icebreakers. Everyone got very excited and it put a lot of energy in the room. But next time, I think we have to time box the icebreaker because we weren't able to get to the rest of our agenda. So you might want to think about designing it so that it has an end.
Great. And Andrea, how are you going to respond to that?
Thank you for the feedback. I appreciate you noticing the effort I put into planning the icebreakers, and I'd be curious to hear some tips you might have on maybe icebreakers that take less time, or how to wrap up an icebreaker session when we notice that it's starting to go off the rails.
That's great. So Katie, how did you decide? Well, let's switch places. All right. Katie, what is a scenario you would like Andrea to give you feedback on?
I made a 10-minute detour during a meeting to talk about snacks.
That is my kind of meeting. Icebreakers and snacks. That's all I need in a meeting. All right. Andrea, can you give Katie a little feedback on that?
Katie, thanks for I appreciate you taking care to ensure our office is well stocked with snacks. In the future, would you mind taking care of those issues offline or outside of our meeting? Because it took a significant amount of time away from discussing the topic at hand.
That's great. And Katie, how are you going to respond?
Andrea, thank you for pointing that out. I was wondering if things were going sideways. I hear what you're saying, and I think you're right. I need to keep outside issues out of the meeting.
Fantastic. So let me ask you all, and we can look at the next slide if we want. How did you decide what feedback method to use?
Honestly, it's the one I remembered.
That works. That works.
Like strength and then
Yeah.
the suggestion. So
And Andrea, what about you?
I I wanted to say maybe that was like my default method of just like showing appreciation and then trying to point out a specific
Mhm.
like area of improvement. And I said default, but I actually don't know if I do that in in real life.
It's really interesting when you start thinking about it, trying to figure out which method. And it's just like anything else. You might combine methods, right, without even knowing it. And most of the time, that probably doesn't matter. It only matters if you find, wow, I am really not able to get through to this person with the feedback I usually give. Let me try a different method. Maybe something else would be more effective. But if things are going along and you're giving feedback and it's all working, there's nothing really to worry about, right? Was it easier or harder to accept the feedback? Well, it's always easier when it's not an actual situation, right? Because it's not, again, it's not about you personally. Is there anything else that you think maybe made it easier or harder to accept that feedback?
So I think it's the trust. And in this particular situation, I mean, we don't know each other, but it's a low stakes kind
Right.
of feedback situation. So I think the level of trust matches the stakes. And I think we're in a pretty trusting forum here because we are all here to learn about giving feedback, right?
Right.
It's a little bit different, let's say, in a work situation if a certain level of trust isn't there and you're trying to have the discussion about something that is much greater impact.
Yeah. Did anything surprise you?
I thought it was really interesting that they both were like, "Thank you for that feedback." And I'm curious, when people give feedback, do you feel like they often are that night? Like, I think they both said that because we just like saw that as an example, but I'm asking everybody, like, when you guys give feedback, do you feel like people are like, "Thank you for that feedback," or is it, not really something that happens?
I think a lot of times it happens when people are pissed off about being given that feedback.
Oh,
I
okay.
think it is a good stalling technique. Not saying that you shouldn't do it. I'm saying you can probably tell when somebody's like, thank you for that feedback.
Mm.
And when somebody's like, oh my God, thank you for that feedback,
Mhm.
right? Those are two different responses, and both are appropriate depending on your feelings. In comedy, we talk about your emotional truth. So if you get up on stage and you've had a really difficult day or it was traffic to get there, it is perfectly okay to be like, oh my God, I'm so tired. Like you're bringing the audience into your emotional truth. And if your set is about, something personal, that's your emotional truth. It doesn't, I'm always telling my son, he's like, so do you get up there and lie about me? I'm like, I'm not talking about you. It's my emotional truth, right? Um, so I think that's really valid in giving and accepting feedback too. Like you have to be polite. You have to be open to listening to it, but you don't have to admit to something you don't truly feel, right? Your emotional truth is just as valid as the other person's. So I think, yeah, I think sometimes people do. Um, I think it would benefit people a lot to be more willing to be like, I really want to listen to your feedback, but I'm really upset. So we need to talk about this later. I think people are really scared to do that. And I think conversations would go a lot better. I think there's a version of this that I do sometimes in workshops where you have to give and receive the feedback in character, like as a cowboy, as an astronaut, as an overeager intern. So it's really just doing anything you can to practice the mechanics of it. And then when it happens to you in real life, you're much more able to be like, oh, I do know how to respond to this. Let me take a breath. Thank you. That was great feedback. So was there anything else that surprised you about doing it or that it made you think about going forward?
You know, I'm just trying to think, like, we have a regular, like, we have a small, I work in a place with like a 20-person staff, and there's
Mhm.
like people that are very sensitive to feedback. So I'm just trying to think of, like, there's like neural pathways. Whenever you give them feedback, they go to a defensive um place. So yeah, I was just like, if you're willing to be like, yes, thank you so much. But if the person is like, again with this, really, it's just
So that's where like the strength-based can come in. Or that's also an opportunity. It's a two-way conversation. So you give them feedback and they're like, seriously, Katie, you told me this yesterday. You can be like, I hear you. I know I bring this up a lot, but let me
Yeah.
tell you why. Um, Mostly what people want is to feel heard. Oh, we lost
Yeah.
Andrea. Um, no matter what it is, people want to feel heard. So anything you can do to help people feel that way,
Yeah.
it's gonna go better. Um, so the next slide, I know we are coming sort of at the end. I'm going to put this link to the survey also in the chat. This is my way of getting feedback in keeping with the theme of the evening. If you have a minute to do it, and I think Marissa's going to send it out as well. But I would just love to know. I know we're a small group. If there is anything that you feel like you're definitely taking away from this.
I am actually, this is a great refresher for me.
Okay.
My children do not like to hear my feedback. So I have teenagers, and I just got into it a little bit with my daughter yesterday. So I was like, okay, I'm not using any technique or like, any tools with her at all. So, and I agree with you that I always wince with role plays, but they're really good. I mean, like you
Yeah.
said, just to learn to use the tool. And
They've got a little cringe, as your teenagers would say.
yeah,
They have
but,
some cringe, but
yeah. So that's great. Actually, I appreciate it. It's
yeah.
good.
Andrea, she must have gotten kicked
Oh,
out.
she's back.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, Marta, this is fantastic. I find myself, and Katie, I was going down the same path as a parent, but I will take the professional route first. I find myself giving feedback to coaching clients all the time. Um, and so I'm used to providing feedback and I'm comfortable with providing feedback. But I love, like Katie, I love the refresher about just thinking about the frameworks, right? Because sometimes some frameworks will work better with will be received differently given the individual, right? So for me, it's just kind of regrounding me to remind myself about there are different ways to provide feedback. And yes, as a parent, obviously, yeah, there are, all sorts of situations and scenarios where it's like, man, I could probably have done this differently, and having a refresher about feedback models is huge. Like, Marta, where were you? Where were you years ago?
So let me just say, I find it so amazing the things we can do professionally that we can't do at home. I was just thinking about this because my son is 19. He goes to school in Oklahoma. He has a mustache. And the last time he was home, I said, and I just saw a picture of him. I'm like, wow, that mustache is big. But the last time he was home, I'm like, oh, you should get a mustache comb. And he went off. He's like, that is the most ridiculous. Like, if you don't like the mustache, if you don't like the way it looks, just say that. I'm like, oh, yeah, that really was like really bad feedback. Like, over this damn mustache. But like we forget, right? Because the stakes are so much higher, right? What if I tell him that mustache looks ridiculous and then he doesn't come home? What if I tell him that for someone my generation, that mustache is not the way to go. And then he never tells me about his next girlfriend, like whatever it is, the stakes are so much higher that it's really, we think our work stakes are the highest, but really they're our family, I think.
Agree 100%.
Andrea, I know you had to drop out and come back, but I would love if you have any thoughts, if there was anything from this that you found really helpful or that you would take away from it.
Sorry, my battery died,
Oh,
and
no worries.
now I'm in the living room with my kids behind me, so my camera's off. yeah, I appreciate the refreshers, and it's a good reminder of the different frameworks to be able to use. So yeah, it's just giving me some food for thought on how I might tackle some feedback situations that I have at work. Because that actually feels really high stakes for me
Yeah.
right now. It's a little chaotic, and trying to work through how to give feedback to move through a challenging situation.
No, it is. It is. So the very last slide I have is just these are how you can get in touch with me. I have a website that is still not completely set up. If you are more curious about comedy stuff, that's more on Instagram or YouTube. If you're more curious about professional stuff, that's on LinkedIn. And I have a couple of shows coming up that I'm very excited about. I have been working with the local comedy club here on something called the Funniest Female Festival, which is all women. It's 55 female comics from around the country, and they're going to be performing over 4 days, 2 venues. I've been working with them on this for months, and it's actually coming next week, so it's pretty exciting. So if you want to come out to Oak Park, I'll tell you what, we are such a small group. If you want to come out to Oak Park and you want to see any of the shows, just shoot me an email and I will put your little name. You don't even have to buy a ticket. So, because it's just us girls. So, but yeah, feel free if you have any questions or anything else that you want to talk about or need something on, feel free to reach out however you want.
Awesome.
This is great, Marta. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank
Marta,
you.
Well, thank you all. And thank you all for, I know when you think you're coming into and it's going to be a group of people and then like, you're like, oh, wait, now I'm on the spot. Thank you for rolling with that. This is like, to me, one of my nightmares is going to a yoga class and there only being 2 people in it. I'm like, ugh. So I hope it wasn't painful for you, but I appreciate you being able to roll with it.
No, thank
Thank
you.
you.
I think I'm so glad we videotaped it because whoever did not get a chance to come on, they're missing out because it was really, really
Yeah.
great and such a great.
Thank you.
So thank you, Marta. And just to
helpful.
remind everybody, we do workshops like this almost once a month. We have another one coming up Wednesday, November 5th during the lunch hour with Rosie Guagliardo. She's going to be doing Burnout to Brilliance. And then we have an in-person event that's going to be in Evanston on Thursday night, November 6th, like a networking event at the Ox in Evanston. So please come and join us, spread the word to any friends, anyone else that would like to attend. And you could always find us on our website. And again, thanks, Marta. We really appreciate it. And I hope your shows go wonderfully. I'm sure they'll be very funny.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. And I know we're small, but if you do have a minute to fill out the survey, it really helps me because this is something I'm trying to build and figure out which directions to go in. So, and obviously I like taking feedback. I will say thank you and mean it. So
That's awesome.
Thanks to everybody who made it happen. Appreciate it.
And again, thank you because it was a small group. I do appreciate that too, that everybody participated. So thank you. Have a great
Ciao.
Take care,
Thank
ladies.
you.
night.
good night.
I'm going to stop the recording. Hold on. Oh, shoot. There we go. Stop. Okay.